welcome to the Manhattan City Commission meeting for Tuesday, March 16th. And we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the next item on the agenda would be Commissioner comments. So we'll begin with Commissioner Reddy.
This is Commissioner Reddy. I just wanted to say we have the ribbon cutting for the Douglas Center on March 25th at 3:30, the Douglas Activity Center. And this has been long overdue, and we hope everybody comes and celebrates with David Baker and the entire Douglas community, as well as the rest of Manhattan. I also wanted to point out that on March 29th, there's a Race, Justice, Safety, and Policing virtual program at 7 p.m. from 7 to 8:45 p.m. It's called Let's Talk MHK. It's on a Monday, and you have to register, and I believe it's on social media all over the place. So those are just a couple of highlights, and that's about it. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Estabrook. One comment about the ATA that I mentioned earlier. I serve on their committee, and they have rolled out a new application that you can download on your phone and use to get passes, 30-day passes, distribute those out. So that's something to look for. That's the app is called the Token Transit. The other thing that they're working on is just zeroing in on some federal assistance that might be coming. And I wanted to mention the MPO meeting for tomorrow is postponed for a month. And finally, that housing assistance from the state, which was the Kansas Emergency Rental Assistance application, is live through the Kansas Housing Resource Corporation, and that's $180 million in rental assistance to Kansans that are eligible, up to 12 months of rent, including utilities forward and backwards. And actually, the one other unique thing that was revealed was it includes some internet. If you have internet utilities that are either in arrears or expected to be as you put deposits, there's assistance as part of KERA, K-E-R-A.
I think there's nothing pressing. I mean, we briefed each other earlier.
Okay, then we'll move on to the consent agenda. And last legislative meeting, we placed on the table the discussion and vote on the conference center payment and rebate, and that was item O, so we need a motion to remove that from the table.
Mayor, I move that we remove item O from the table.
Second.
Okay, then City Clerk, if you'd call the roll.
Mayor Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Morris,
Yes.
Commissioner Hennesall,
Yes?
Commissioner Estabrook,
Yes.
Commissioner Reddy.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, now the items on the consent agenda are those of a routine and housekeeping nature, or those items which have previously been reviewed by the City Commission. A commissioner may request an item be moved to the end of the general agenda.
Is your mic on?
Mine is, oh,
Okay, I've got it on now for sure. So does the commission have any questions or comments on any of the consent agenda items?
I wanted to ask about the item N, the levy project. And it says that we're going to be paying an invoice for $5.3 million. Is this project creeping up, or is it still holding with the original total estimate that we thought? I know that there's a variability with regard to buying easements, because that is not a sure thing until after they're negotiated and we have an agreement. But I just wondered, I guess maybe it'd be good to have an update and you don't have to do it right now, because I don't expect you to have it in your head, but I would like just to see where we are comparing to what was projected.
This is Dennis Marshall, Assistant City Manager. Deputy City Manager Jason Hilders can chime in, but I know that this item represents about 35% of the official project budget. So yes, if you want to consider is it on track and considered, yes, we're anticipating this expense along at this point in time for the levy project. And so again, it brings us about 35% of the project cost. But we can give you an update on that with a follow-up.
That'd be great, thank you. And the other thing for me is item H, and I plan to vote no. This is a new development. I'm pleased to see it. I have no real objections to the development, other than one of the owners is 3 years delinquent on property taxes on the Riley County Treasurer's website. And about 6-8 months ago, this commission removed a prohibition. We weren't going to do new development for developers that had delinquent property taxes. And so I voted no at that time, and I'm going to be voting no today. I don't know the person. It doesn't matter. It's the issue. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other commissioner comments, is there anyone that has public comment on the consent agenda items? Okay, seeing none, and I'll just reiterate item O that we took off the table. We had discussed payment plan. I think the commission decided we didn't want to put this into the last balloon payment, so the city staff renegotiated that, and the repayment plan is now set to take place over 10 years and starting in 2023. And so that adjusted that, I think, to the satisfaction of everyone. So if there's no other comments, we can take a motion on the consent agenda.
Mayor, this is Commissioner Reddy. I move we approve the consent agenda with the exceptions mentioned.
Well, O is the only one in play.
Oh, O is not the entire consent agenda?
We're gonna vote the whole consent agenda,
We don't need to do anything with item O.
because we took it off the table. It's now part of the consent agenda, so the entire
So
consent
I
agenda.
move to approve the
Okay.
consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, and City Clerk, if you could call the roll, please.
Commissioner Morse,
I approve the consent agenda, and I vote no on item H.
Commissioner Hattasol,
Yes.
Commissioner Estabrook,
Yes, except no on item H.
Commissioner Reddy,
Yes.
Mayor Butler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0 with the exception of item H, which carries 3-2.
Okay, so now we can move on to the general agenda. And the first item on the general agenda is to rezone and amend St. Isidore's Catholic Student Center planned unit development and final plat of St. Isidore's Catholic Student Center, Unit 2. And Chad Bunger, you have the honor of doing the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for having me. Hopefully you can hear me with my mask. Provide the staff report on these three items. What we have is a rezoning of a property that's directly next door to what we know as the St. Isidore's Student Center, or St. Isidore's Catholic Student Center off of Denison. They're also amending their previous PUD that was approved a few years ago. And then we also have a final plat. So I'll go through all these three items together if that's okay. St. Isidore's Catholic Student Center is pretty much in the heart of downtown, right next door to K-State to the west. More specifically, it's this odd-shaped lot here at the corner of Denison and Anderson. If you've been by there recently, they're doing quite a bit of construction on the existing student center. The student center became a planned unit development back in 2005, I believe, for a much larger center for its Catholic students and for the community. Just never came to fruition. And then in 2019, they amended that PUD to have a whole new site plan. So here's the rezoning of the PUD, and then, as I mentioned, we're looking at rezoning this property immediately next door. That's 1826 Anderson. It's zoned R3, University Overlay District. And it did have an apartment complex and off-street parking, that building, and the parking has since been removed. So this was the current PUD. They had planned for a larger sanctuary, and then the student center, and then an attached rectory for their staff, for the pastors. Off-street parking, whatnot. They have since proposed, or they have since bought the property immediately to the west, and are proposing a revision to the site where they would have a detached rectory and then a much larger off-street parking space, or a parking lot immediately in the front. The site circulation comes from a variety of ways, off of Denison, which is basically there now with the reconfigured parking lot for handicap spaces here, and then would flow to the north or to the south to a new parking lot. There's an interesting agreement between Kansas State University and the diocese, where they have an agreement to use that parking lot and the travelway as an exit point, although it's not a filed agreement just because of the complexities that would need to happen with the university. So they provided staff enough documentation that we're pretty satisfied that it can stand the test of time. But regardless, if that were to ever go away for some reason, they do have this second way out onto Anderson Avenue. And you can see here it's right in, right out only because of the traffic onto Anderson Avenue. And our engineers and fire department have reviewed all these access points and accept them. There will be a privacy fence along that west property line separating the parking lot from the apartment building next door to it. And then you can see here the landscape plan. So heavily landscaped for the area. I breezed through, summarized the two public hearings that the planning board heard fairly quickly with the rezoning of the adjacent lot, as well as the PUD amendment. But by and large, they're fairly straightforward in regards to the standards for rezoning and PUDs, PUD amendment, in that they'll provide little, if no impact on adjacent properties. It's an adequate and appropriate use for the site, and it works well with the neighborhood. What you have before you here is the replat of the area, basically eliminating the adjoining property line that's there now and providing the easements needed to service the site as well as the surrounding area. So it's a fairly straightforward plat in that regard too. I don't really have much more. All the information from the planning board and staff reports were in your packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have for these three items. And I should have said, planning board recommended approval of the three items, approved the plat, recommended approval of the rezoning of 1826 Anderson, and the amendment to the St. Isidore's Student Center PUD, and city staff also recommends approval of those three items. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
I think this is a good arrangement because the development and the neighbors and the traffic are all accommodated, and
Yep.
this is certainly a busy intersection.
Yeah, I think they've managed the site as well as one could for the
And
neighborhood they find themselves in.
it helps that they've picked up the lot to the west too. That really helps the overall, and it helps their parking, on-site parking.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Chad, could you tell me a
Yes.
little bit about their drainage water system over there? It seems like, yeah, it would take, are they going to be replacing the stormwater system and everything? It seems like needs upgrading and it's gonna take up a lot more space as far as green space.
Sure. They did do a drainage study, and I will defer the results of that drainage study and their plan to the consulting engineer for that question.
Okay.
But
Because-
they have managed it, and our Public Works Department reviewed it and accepts their plans, but I'll have them provide the details in full.
Yeah, if they're gonna do it, I'd rather have all of that done at the same time.
Yes.
Because otherwise we're gonna see it going downward into other areas where we're trying to redo all of that area down in Aggieville and such, and we don't want water just going all over the place when we're trying to fix some of these, problem areas. Sorry, I'm far away from the mic when I'm speaking. Other than that, I think, I think it's already being flatted and it's already flat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a good project to move forward with, and I saw the designs, they look, good enough from what I understand, but I'm just concerned about, parking, number one, but the other piece is the drainage piece of it, because that's something we don't often see, but when it rains, I'm just worried that it's gonna collect all over at one spot again, unless we fix it as they're trying to construct
Sure.
the process.
Yep. I'll let them answer that question for you.
Are they here?
I believe so.
Okay. Yeah, if any one of you can address the drainage question, that would be great. I'm not sure who to call on.
Good evening. I'm Judd Gladden. I'm with Schwab Eden. We did the civil engineering, site planning, and landscape architecture for the project. So how we're handling the stormwater drainage is currently, there's no on-site underground stormwater. It's all surface flow or piped and released to the gutters. So we're adding an underground storm sewer detention. It's in that north parking lot piece. So there'll be underground pipes. So we've picked up the majority of all the roof drainage for the new church, the new rectory, and the parking lot are gonna be funneled to that system. And it's gonna tie into a box culvert that's north of there. And it's gonna release it at the same rate as what is happening now. So that's the plan for the storm sewer.
No, yeah, I've been to that church before. I think it's beautiful. I'm glad the extension's happening. I think what you explained right now, I think addresses my concern a little bit more. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other commissioner comments, the public was able to send in electronically comments today till 4 PM. We didn't receive any electronically, but we will be able to take in-person comments, and we had 2 individuals sign up. I think Judge just spoke, but I think Bruce, you were on the list first, so if you'd like to come up and.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Initially, I would like to express our appreciation to the Planning Board for recommending approval to the Commission at this point. This is a project that St. Isidore's has been working on for the better part of 20 years and has finally come to fruition, as you've acknowledged. The expansion of the new chapel, you'll see that starting right after Easter, and that construction will then begin with the demolition of the existing chapel, actually. The expansion into the parking area is critical to the success of this project going forward, and the rectory relocation will accommodate the priests well. Dr. Doug Hinken is also here this evening, president of the building committee, and he may have some comments he may wish to make as well. I'll stand for any comments or questions that the commission might have.
Bruce, what's the estimated time of completion? Is it like fall of 2023 or later than that?
The estimated completion from BHS Construction Company, who's the contractor on the project, is August of 22.
Okay.
In time for fall semester next year.
Okay,
Stand for any
excellent.
questions, and Dr. Hinken may wish to make a comment.
Any others for public comment? Please remember to state your full name and address for the record.
Doug Deacon, 1426 Shangbrook. I'm the chairman of the building committee, and I'll just stand for any questions if you have any about the project. I think the plans and the planning board report speak for themselves, so I'll be glad to answer any questions that come up.
Looks like we're good, thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public comment period. And this particular item has two motions on it, so to cover them, so we'll have to do the first one and then the second one.
In that case, Mayor, I would move that we approve ordinance number 7530, rezoning 1826 Anderson Avenue to St. Isidore's Catholic Student Center Planned Unit Development, and amending ordinance number 7407 for the St. Isidore's Catholic Student Center PUD, based on the findings in the staff reports with the three conditions of approval and the recommendation of the Manhattan Urban Area Planning Board.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, so City Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Hassel,
Yes.
Commissioner Estabrook,
Yes.
Commissioner Reddy,
Yes.
Mayor Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Morris.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Mayor, I move that we accept the easements and rights-of-way as shown on the final plat of the St. Isidore's Catholic Student Center, Unit 2, located at 711 Dennison Avenue, generally located at the northwest corner of Dennison Avenue and Anderson Avenue, based on conformance with the Manhattan Urban Area subdivision regulations.
We have a motion and a second. So City Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Estabrook,
Yes.
Commissioner Reddy, Mayor Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Morris,
Yes.
Commissioner Hassel.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, we can move on to item B on the agenda, which is consider ordinance number 7531, amending ordinance number 6860 in the final development plan of West Loop Shopping Center Commercial PUD to allow for window signs. And Chad Bunger will be able to present again. Thank
I
you.
will. I've got a busy evening tonight. Thank you, Mayor. Again, Chad Bunger, Assistant Director with Community Development. This PUD amendment is for West Loop Shopping Center. That's been a busy shopping district for us in terms of development. We're excited about this. This one's a fairly minor PUD in relationship to what else has occurred in the shopping center. I think we're all familiar with where West Loop is, just east of Setchild Road, north of Anderson and south of Claflin Road. This PUD amendment would be for all of the site. It would be a blanket, an amendment for all the buildings and all the uses on the development. Although the reality is it'll probably most impact or be related to the buildings on the north and the west side, the east side of that development, where the tenant spaces are. Where this came about, a new business within the shopping center on the east side of that, during their renovation and construction phase of opening that business, had installed a number of exterior window signs, and they were or are not today with the PUD a permitted window type, and so unfortunately we had to work with them to bring them into compliance. When this PUD was created in 2010, the owner at the time created really a customized sign package for the development, and they just had not envisioned window signage for the development at that time. So we've been working with the site management to accommodate this. The site management proposed some window sign requirements that work probably very well for them as the landlord or the management firm in relationship to their tenants, but as staff trying to enforce that or try to apply those effectively across the development, it would be challenging. So we worked with them and proposed our own set of standards. But by and large, what we've come up with is for exterior signs on windows, we would take the square footage of all the windows within that business establishment, and they would be able to have up to 50% of that window area. That's to maintain that pedestrian connection to that business so it's not fully blocked, because we think that is a fairly important piece for retail commercial, is to have that window dressing, if you will. But we also have allowed those, have that 50% allowance so that one window bank could be completely enclosed. The business that was going in was a fitness center, and they have a unique need compared to maybe a retailer where a fitness class, you don't want people walking by and looking in on that fitness class. And so we've worked with them that they could enclose one entire bank. Also the caveat, or bank of windows, also the caveat to that is we have a fairly specific definition for signage where it's logos and words and images related to that business for commercial speech. If, let's say, this third bank of windows was just a plastic covering, no words, no interrelationship to logos or anything like that with the other signages, we would allow those to be covered without any issues. It's just if they were to advertise their products or somehow be combined with that logo of that business, then we would have to look at it a little bit more closely. But if it's just a blank exterior window or covering, it would not meet our definition of a sign. So that's not an issue. Yes?
So you're saying, if they just wanted to put some opaque thing that stopped people from being able to see in, that's fine?
Yes.
It's not, you're talking about some kind of clear thing, it's
Right.
something that would stop
Yeah.
visibility. Got it.
Yep. So a vinyl covering, you can't see through it. If it was just black or white or whatever color, not a problem. But if it were to start having logos or verbiage related to the business, then we would have to look at it as a sign. And we proposed that with the ownership of the management of the site, and they were, we came to a good agreement on that. So that's really the proposal. The other piece to this is this only deals with exterior window signs. So if someone wanted to put their logo on the inside of the window, they could cover every square inch of that window. Not an issue, because we do not regulate what goes on inside of that business when it comes to signage. So that's really, I kind of explained this, sorry. The graphics probably would have helped a little better than my explanation. That's really the nuts and the bolts of this PUD amendment. Considering other development that have occurred in West Loop, this is fairly straightforward. We brought this to the planning board on March 1st. They recommended approval. And so bringing this forward, their recommendation forward to you, as well as city staff's recommendation to amend the PUD.
I do have one question,
Yes,
Chad.
ma'am.
Is the reason McDonald's is not included is because it is not in this PUD? Is McDonald's like a separate PUD then?
McDonald's, I believe, is it's zone C5. It's a separate zoning district on a separate
So
lot.
it's totally
Yep,
separate?
totally separate ownership,
Because it's a little hunk out of the corner,
Yes,
so I just wondered.
but it's
Thank
not part of the PUD.
you. Yeah, thanks. This is more akin to what we see in some other areas, like maybe along Seth Child with Dollar Tree and
Sure.
where the sign is on it used to be, is this true? It used to be that the shopping center had the identity and they just put up a sign with all of the different businesses and depended on that to draw people in. And so now we're using more signage for each individual business. Kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I think West Loop does a good job with their signage, identifying the whole shopping center as well as individual businesses.
Right.
And then we have a set of sign, if this was a straight zoning district, C2 for example, we have a set of zoning regulations for each business facade.
Mm-hmm.
And so, every business ultimately has their own signage needs, and so we're just trying to bring this more in line with their signage needs for the whole shopping center.
Okay, thanks.
Great,
Okay, any other commissioner comments on this particular item?
thank you.
Okay, if there's no other commissioner comments, we did take public comments through the website, did not receive any by 4 PM today. We can open in-person comments if anybody would like to speak on this particular issue. Okay, seeing no one, we'll close public comment.
Mayor,
If the-
I move that we approve ordinance number 7531, amending ordinance number 6860 for the West Loop Shopping Center Commercial PUD to allow window signs as a permitted sign type, generally located south of Claflin Road, east of Sethchild Road, and north of Anderson Avenue, based on the findings in the staff report and the recommendation of the Manhattan Urban Area Planning Board with 4 conditions of approval.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, so City Clerk, if you could please call the roll.
Commissioner Reddy,
Yes.
Mayor Butler,
Yes?
Commissioner Morse,
Yes.
Commissioner Hassel,
Yes?
Commissioner Estabrook.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, then we can move on to item C, and Chad will be up again. This is to consider ordinance number 7532, amending ordinance number 6972, and the final development plan of Bluemont and North Manhattan Hotel PUD, commercial approved PUD, to allow for alcohol sales in the ground floor commercial spaces and update the PUD signage plan.
Thank you once again, Mayor. Chad Bunger, Assistant Director for Community Development. This PUD amendment is for the hotel at the corner of Bluemont and North Manhattan. As you see here, right next to campus. I think if you've driven through town, you recognize this great-looking building. When it was developed, the PUD that established it was done at a different time in relationship to Aggieville and the neighborhood. And so it was approved with conditions of approval that limited the sale of alcohol in the retail spaces beyond the hotel lobby. We concluded that the bar and lounge area in the hotel was accessory to that hotel use, but other spaces, I think there's 3 or 4 of them, we restricted the use or the sale of alcohol in those spaces. And I'll get into that a little bit more. So here's the zoning districts. It is a little different than when the PUD first was approved with the hotel. And so here recently, the owner has proposed to remodel one of the ground floor tenant spaces, this space here, to have a new venture in the town, entertainment and restaurant and drinking establishment titled Gouldsby's. And when we reviewed the plan and looked at the PUD, we obviously recognized that a standalone business could not sell the alcohol on its premises. So we had to go through the PUD amendment. At the same time as we were reviewing the building permit, what we allowed them to do is continue with the building permit to remodel that space and at their own risk, with the understanding that if this PUD failed, they'd have a great looking space and not be able to sell alcohol in it, which they have begun. And as we reviewed that, we recognized that their sign package was different than what was approved with the final development plan also. And so we took the opportunity to amend the PUD to include a new sign package for this space as well, as you can see here. You can see the floor plan it's proposed. Going to be an entertainment space for arcade and skee ball and a restaurant and a drinking establishment. Something I think I'll enjoy. And as you see here, when we were reviewing it, in relationship to the ground floor commercial spaces, shall not include a licensed premise for alcohol, alcoholic liquor, or cider malt beverage sales. So this is the reason for that, the PUD amendment portion with that. And then the signage was fairly specific for the building. In relationship to approving it, as I mentioned, when this PUD was originally established, we had an entirely different vision of what was to occur to the north of Bluemont Avenue. We really wanted to contain Aggieville within Aggieville, and only till the Aggieville Community Vision Plan did we fully recognize that the asset that we had in Aggieville, and that how we could have that same amenity to the north of Bluemont that would not adversely impact the neighborhood to the north. The streetscape that we're bringing online along Bluemont would assist with that. And so really everything in the immediate area has significantly changed, to where staff is not as concerned with the alcohol sales along Bluemont as we were 10 years ago or more. So, and this kind of just shows we now have, instead of single-family homes that were subdivided into apartments, we have large apartments with some commercial space. And the Bluemont has certainly shown that you could have the convention space in the lounge area and not be a significant detriment to the areas to the north. So we were supportive of this PUD amendment. And then when you consider what's with the hotel that's going to the south, the Aggieville Community Vision really embraced this becoming more commercial along Bluemont, to the point we're even recommending it rezoned to a C3, although most of it's a PUD now. In relationship to the signage, it's fairly straightforward. It's good-looking signage. It won't distract from the development overall, and it's in line with the commercial character along Bluemont and Aggieville. So that's really all I have for that. Similarly, the planning board heard this item on March 1st, recommended approval to you all for both items without any real issues, and city staff is also recommending approval of this PUD amendment for the use of the tenant space in the signage plan update. So happy to answer any questions you may have.
I just have one that occurred to me as I was reviewing this. Is the north side of Bluemont included in the Aggieville Vision Plan?
It is, yes.
It is.
Yep, and
Just-
the plan calls out
Just
that,
to the alley, or,
essentially, yeah.
okay, all
Yep.
right. That's all I could remember. I thought the alley was the defining line. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, originally the Bluemont didn't have a restaurant, so I'm glad they're looking at expanding and rethinking some of that. I think it just seems appropriate with the Marriott across the street, which will probably have alcohol and a restaurant and such, to stay competitive.
Sure.
And being local, it's certainly something I would be supportive of. And I thought they already serve alcohol in their meeting room upstairs on the 5th floor or
Right.
something.
They do, and the lounge sells alcohol on the ground floor. What staff determined at that time that was accessory to the hotel. This would be a separate entity, and the condition of approval of the PUD prohibited those separate entities to sell alcohol, so.
Yeah, no, I'm supportive of this, although I'm getting lost in PUDs, so I don't know if the UDO, whatever it is called now, addresses some of these changes. I know this is a smaller change.
Yep.
But some of, maybe the rezoning and other PUDs, like we saw with the church, I don't know how all of that fits in. So I'm looking forward to that longer conversation.
Right.
But at this time, for the Bluemont, I feel it's appropriate and it's very timely.
Yep. So in a quick nutshell on the development code, we are writing it so we hopefully will have less of these customized PUDs. We'll have a different name for them. They're planned development floating districts. But our hope is, with all the changes, we will have less reason to do PUDs for these sort of things. In addition, we are creating different procedures where these will be easier to, these smaller changes like the window signage before this one and this will be a little easier to accommodate. This one, because the conditions of approval in the PUD ordinance was real specific, we'll probably have to amend this one, something similar to this. But if the conditions of approval are silent on whatever minor or change is proposed, we have some processes we can better accommodate it. We won't get rid of all these old or these existing PUDs because they are established individually by ordinance, but we're trying to find ways to make them streamlined a little better so we can address these, especially like the signage thing that we just saw, or even this signage package, we could address a little bit easier.
I agree. I think there are two different things. This one is much easier and probably can be easier to modify, whereas a signage one is a little bit bigger deal. But I, like I said, as far as this particular issue with the Bluemont and alcohol sales and restaurant, it seems quite appropriate.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm just glad we'll have a place to play skee ball here in
I know,
Mankato now. I'm
looking forward to that with my sons.
I do have a question. Yusha mentioned the Marriott. It was my understanding there's no real bar space or convention center space in that hotel.
Yeah, I think there's.
One conference room.
Yeah, and maybe some lounge space for, managers' receptions or,
Okay.
those kind of things.
Because they were really playing that down.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, seeing no other commissioner comments, we were able to take electronic comments today. We received none by 4 p.m. We can open for public comments on this particular topic if anyone wishes to speak on it. Okay, seeing none.
No, wait.
There is one.
There's one. Is
Okay.
that Andy?
Yes, Andy Suber, Lawrence, Kansas. Thanks for considering this. I'm just here for questions, so if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer.
No, think we're good. The staff did a great job on the packet.
I agree. Thank you.
Actually.
Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 7532, amending ordinance number 6972 for Bluemont and North Manhattan Hotel Commercial PUD to allow for alcohol sales in the first floor commercial space and update the PUD signage plan for the site generally located northeast of the intersection of Bluemont Avenue and North Manhattan based on the findings in the staff report and the recommendation of the Manhattan Urban Area Planning Board with 5 conditions of approval.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, so if, City Clerk Brenda, if you could please call the roll.
Mayor Butler,
Yes?
Commissioner Morse,
Yes.
Commissioner Hattasol,
Yes?
Commissioner Estabrook,
Yes.
Commissioner Reddy.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, then we'll move on to item D, which is to consider an ordinance extending mask or other face covering requirements. And Wes Garrison, Assistant City Attorney, has the honor of presenting this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. As Mr. Mayor said, Assistant City Attorney Wes Garrison, I'm here to talk about the second reading of the mask ordinance. Just a point of clarification on the slides that you were presented, that you have with you today, there's a little bit of a mistake in there. When they were given to you early at that time, they were given, we did not, rather there was some miscommunication, and we believed that the county had extended the ordinance, their health order, to May 16th. So there's a couple slides in there that does show that the Riley County Commission extended the order to May 16th. That is incorrect. They did not do that. They are waiting till Thursday before they actually make any kind of action regarding their what's going to be Health Order 21. So I just want to clarify that point, that you may see in the slides a reference to Riley County Commission continuing it or extending it, but that's actually incorrect. Okay, so moving on, a little bit of background for those watching. There is no general federal or state requirement for face coverings. There's no countywide requirement in Pot County. But within the city limits, Riley County Health Order requires face masks outside the city limits. However, because of the wording, it indicates that folks inside the city limits must follow what the city ordinance is. So if there is no city ordinance requiring a face mask, then there would be no face mask requirement within city limits. That's the current language of the Riley County Health Order. Based on the Commission's discussion at the first reading, city administration researched the possibility of amending our current city ordinance to state that it would expire when the Riley County Health Order ends. However, an ordinance by the city cannot contain a provision that repeals the ordinance on the actions of a third party. The reason for that is such a repeal would not properly occur with the same formality as the adoption of the ordinance itself. The repeal must be done in the same act of equal dignity. So therefore, we could not provide to the City Commission an option with that language. So what we did provide to the Commission is 3 options. Since we don't know what the county, at this point, whether they will extend, amend, or repeal, I'm presenting 3 options to the Commission for tonight. Option 1 is to extend the mask ordinance to expire on May 16th. Option 2 is extend the mask ordinance until it's been repealed. And option 3 is let the mask ordinance that's currently in place right now expire April 1st. Option 1 extends the current ordinance till May 16th. The reason that date was picked or selected for the Commission is that's when USD 383 and K-State University release students on May 14th. KSU graduation is also May 15th and 16th, so it would be on that end time. The Commission, if it so chooses, can insert a different date. If tonight you decide May 16th does not work, then you can certainly pick another date and we can just supplement that in. And again, as we are doing tonight, or as the Commission is considering tonight, you can also extend that ordinance further with another meeting if you so choose. Option 2 is an ordinance that removes the expiration date section of the ordinance in its entirety. It essentially extends the mask ordinance until it's repealed by another ordinance. Katie Jackson, City Attorney Katie Jackson provided you a sample of what is the repeal ordinance. It's ready to go. All that would have to happen is the Commission would get together and meet and vote on that.
Wes?
Yes, Commissioner.
Would that require a 1 vote, or would that be a 2 thing to 1 vote would do enough for that, wouldn't it?
I believe 1 vote because the Commission just approved the consent agenda to allow 1 reading of ordinances.
Okay.
So yes, to answer that, in order to enact that swiftly, it's just a matter of when we can get the Commission together and have a vote on that.
But isn't there a little caveat there that a commissioner can request that it be 2 readings?
Yes, there is that caveat.
So that is a possibility that it would take 2 readings.
And again, another caveat is if the Commission were to go with option 2 and subsequently adopt that repealing ordinance, it would take about 2 to 5 days before it actually is published. And so there's a little bit of delay on that as well. Option 1 and option 2 considerations. If the Commission is interested in ensuring or maintaining consistency throughout the city, option 1 and or option 2 do maintain that. Or in other words, do allow for consistency throughout the city limits, both Pot County and Riley County side. Option 3 lets the mask ordinance expire on April 1st. If the Commission decides to do that, there would be no mask requirement within the city limits under the current language of the county health order if the county goes ahead and decides to continue their order beyond April 1st. If the county amends their health order to include the city, which is an option that they could do, so their health order could include the city limits, unlike what it does right now, it would only apply to the Riley County side. So in the circumstance that the city decides to go with option 3, but the county does amend their health order to include just the city as opposed to the language of the city ordinance applying, then Pot County side would still have no mask ordinance requirement. And so there would be that disparity between those 2 sides of the city. And that could open the door for some inconsistency. If the Commission decides to go with option 3 tonight, we would ask that the Commission, the Commission would need to adopt an airport-only ordinance that was discussed on the first reading. I thought Airport Director Jesse Romo was going to be here today. I don't know. Oh, there he is right there. All right. So if the commission has any specific questions as far as the federal requirements or why we're pushing the commission, if they choose option 3 to adopt such an ordinance, he can certainly answer those questions. City administration would recommend the commission, if you choose option 3, we would recommend that the commission adopt a first reading of an airport-only ordinance. Now, you don't have the text in front of you, but that's okay. You can still adopt an ordinance without the actual text in front of you to apply a mask requirement to just specifically the Manhattan Regional Airport property. Subsequent to that, the city administration could set a special meeting as part of the March 23rd work session, and legal would provide the actual text for the commission to consider. This would allow the city attorney's office to evaluate what exactly is needed in that ordinance, and get more information, specifically how the county decides to act on their health order and any other information we may need to put in there, such as FFA or TSA language. My understanding is that option 1 and option 2 would satisfy FAA and TSA requirements without the need for an airport-only ordinance. So just to clarify, the airport-only ordinance should only be adopted tonight if the commission decides to go with option 3. If the county amends their order to include the city limits, that may very well satisfy the FAA and TSA requirements. But again, hence that's why the city attorney's office would like some time to determine whether or not that language would satisfy those requirements. So I think that pretty much ends my presentation as far as those 3 options. I can answer some questions about those specifically. And again, Jesse Romo is here, so if you have airport questions, he can answer those.
Okay, commissioners, if you have questions. Okay, I just wanted to clarify, I was, visited by Zoom on the county commission meeting, and it was a discussion item, but Commissioner Ford did bring it up for a vote.
Yes.
And it was a little bit confusing because, I left there with a distinct impression, and I also spoke with him this afternoon. He was at the chamber meeting, and that came up. And I got the distinct impression that, the health department recommended a 16 May date to extend it. They also discussed extending it to the city limits, and they talked about the problem with Pot County. So my impression is that between now and, the next few days, at least within a week, they're gonna pass Health Order 21, which will include a mask mandate that will also encompass the city. But that they're also aware that it will not encompass the Pot County side. And that was the impression I had. I don't know if any of the rest of you listened to that or went back and viewed it on tape. But that was what I walked away from there, and I didn't really have any problem with that. And I understand, that it's impossible to tie what we do to the health department order because of the legal requirement that you gave. That doesn't surprise me. But that's what I took away from that meeting. So if anybody wants to comment on that.
Mayor, I took away the same, and going into that meeting, I think I had heard the same that was confirmed at that, that public meeting at the county, that the health department was recommending the extension to the end of the school year, and that the county would then probably see that in a order 21, and that it ran into the problem of how our legal described, is it the same dignity that the ordinance is created has to be the same way that it is repealed. And so, which is interesting and makes total sense that you can't get rid of something in a different way than you create something. So that idea that we talked about before is not legally possible. And even if we did that, it's my understanding that it would, the ordinance would continue on or not be changed because we would have not legally done anything, so it would have kind of been a moot point to do that. So I guess to circle back, my understanding, I hope we hear some public comment, maybe there's some people here, but is that the county is looking to do something and has indicated their intent to be May 16th, and they are, in those conversations, also looking to us to align with that, to not just align with Riley County, but to incorporate Pot County, which in my mind is the best option for what we're all trying to seek, and having good intentions. And the idea of trust and control is not the topic here. It's about getting everybody on the same page so we're all doing what we need to do to get to the summer. So that's my understanding of what that meeting is. I know there's been a lot of noise and discussion about the intentions and things of what the county's up to, but I just wanted that to be clear, that that's my understanding of their intentions, and it really doesn't impact ours, other than they can't do anything about the Pot County side of the city, and we certainly can, and they're asking us to help with that.
Yeah, that appears to be a good summation. It basically leads you to option one, which would allow us to mirror the county's intent, and that's probably the only way to legally do it. And it also takes care of the airport issue for the airport manager.
What I heard, I watched this county commission meeting, and they left it that they were gonna wait and see what the city did. And, which leaves us nowhere with no assurances. And so I am prepared to support option one, but I want to hear what the public says. I mean, we're jumping into the conversation here, and I know we are allowed to, but if I were a member of the public and I came to speak, I would be put off that I didn't get to say anything that made a difference.
Any other commissioner comments? Okay, then we can open it to public comment. Now, we did receive website comments up till 4 p.m. today, and the city clerk says there were 9 public comments received. The interesting thing, though, on these public comments, I think the commissioners, you've noticed this too, that if they're put in a form and sent to all of us, then it comes out as one of these 9, but you also may have received individual ones, or 1 or 2 of us may have had one addressed, because I got more than 9. Okay, and again, I didn't try to keep a tally score of what they said, but basically, people are making a case on both sides of the issue, and they send us links and things of that nature from various people. And so there's just not full agreement on which way to go. But I do appreciate, those of you that send in those comments. There's some pretty good dialogue there, and only 1 or 2, as I said before, that I consider to be less than cordial on either side, and those aren't going to get a good response. But we've gotten some great dialogue, and tell you, it makes your head hurt as you try to balance out, both sides of this particular issue. So, is there anyone here tonight that wishes to make a public comment in person? And if you want to, please come forward. Remember to state your full name and address, and we're limited to 5 minutes.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Amanda Teleso. I've been in contact with a couple of you over email, so it's great to be here in person and put some names to faces. I live off of Hillcrest Avenue. I want to talk about enforcement of the mask ordinance today. I think it really needs to be addressed if this mask ordinance is going to be extended. Currently, Section 22-72B states, the persons responsible for all businesses or organizations in the city must require all employees, customers, visitors, members, or members of the public to wear a mask or other face covering. Yet, RCPD and the City of Manhattan recommend no enforcement by individual citizens. From the RCPD's website, FAQs, the Riley County Police Department asks residents to avoid confrontations with individuals or businesses that do not comply with the ordinance. And from the City of Manhattan website, The city discourages residents and business owners from getting into arguments with individuals or businesses that do not comply with the ordinance. Enforcement by management is not recommended, yet the current code allows for punishment of business owners for noncompliance by customers. On top of that, our CPD's website highlights in bolded letters, do not call 911 to report a violation. So if a business owner is discouraged from confronting non-compliant customers and also discouraged from calling 911 for this non-compliance, how then does it make sense for that business owner to be fined for their customers' unwillingness to put on a mask? I worry that the mask ordinance will be used to punish business owners and at a time when they are just beginning to restore to normal operations. The city should do everything in their power to support these local businesses and keep them open. Thank you very much for your time and your service to this community.
Okay, thank you. Excellent point. Are there any other individuals that would like to make public comment? Please come forward. Remember to state your name and address. Thank you.
Christine Benny, 1004 Brianna Court. And I wasn't going to say anything, but I feel that continuing the mask ordinance until May 16th at least is very prudent. I understand about going into places and not being able to, if somebody's not wearing a mask, because I've gone to the grocery store and there's people not wearing a mask. And I don't know how to address that at all. That's totally yours. But I think at least until the school year ends, we need to continue the mask ordinance. I think it's really important. We're doing such a good job. I think Riley County is one of the leading counties in the state that's doing the right things. So to continue that at least until the school year ends and then readdress it again and see how we're doing at that time is the best thing possible. So, and thank you very much for all that you do.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make a public comment on the mask issue? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comments and turn it back over to the commission for discussion.
As I said, I think that, first of all, the mask ordinance should not be allowed to expire now, that it should be extended. It seems we have good agreement among the university, the school district, the city, now the county, but, it's also hard to pass ordinances when you need a period of time to have meetings and publish, and when there's no certainty, and I was looking for some certainty. And so I would, and because the county's ordinance cannot cover Potawatomi County, that part of the city that's in Potawatomi County. And so the question becomes, if we allow Riley County to issue the order for the entire county, what is the possibility for covering that part of the city in Potawatomi County? It's my understanding that we can't pass an ordinance that just covers the part of the city in Potawatomi County. Is that true, Wes? I'm put you on the spot, I guess.
Legally, I'm not ready to advise on that specific issue. Logistically, that may be very difficult because most citizens don't necessarily know what part of the city is on Pot County. I mean, there's some clear indications, Walmart, that kind of stuff, but specifically what residences, what other establishments are on Pot County side versus Riley County side, I think that would be difficult. So for practical reason, that would be difficult. Legally, I couldn't advise at this point whether that would be a possibility, but if the commission wishes, we can look into that further.
Well, I would support option one, which is to extend the mask ordinance to 11:59 on May 16th. It seems like we get the best coverage, we cover the airport, we cover Potawatomi County, we have consistency in the city. The county originally wanted to not put anything out in the county area, and so there was confusion then. I think being consistent here is a good thing. It will also allow us, if we have to, with a variant, and if there are surges in, I don't expect that. I expect all of our good behavior to be rewarded and the virus to not come back in any degree. But it seems like the prudent way to proceed.
Yeah, my comment is, option one does what I was advocating 2 weeks ago. I've always thought we should support the health department, and I listened. Julie, spoke at that meeting and basically said she had analyzed everything to include information from the medical task force, because they sent me a letter and they also sent it to Julie. And so looking at everything, she came to the conclusion that 16 May, was the best date. And it does allow us to mirror it, and I'm not particularly a fan of, mask ordinances, but I think that giving all the options and all the different attitudes about this, that this is probably the best compromise that we can come up with, because it does support the university, it supports the school system, it supports a large number of businesses that are in favor of the mask ordinance. There are some that are not, because as I try to juggle this, it doesn't address that one issue on enforcement. But again, that enforcement thing has always bothered me. The county has no enforcement mechanism at all. We have RCPD that can do it, but I know for a fact we've only written 2 tickets. And the reason for that is your officers have got to use judgment, and I trust them not to, like if I'm a business owner and somebody barges in my store and refuses to wear a mask, and I have a sign there that says you have to, and I try to give them one, and they refuse, I really do not expect RCPD under Director Butler to ticket the business owner. They can ticket that person. And while 911, calling them for mask things would be a disaster, call the admin people. And I'm sure that, they will address it. There's an administrative line, because that is something that's always troubled me. And it could, in some cases, maybe result in what you might call, targeted enforcement, but I haven't seen that happen. We've had this in effect long enough. And I do know that when they wrote the tickets, it did involve some business owners, but just to keep it short, they were quite blatant and basically said, hey, we're not gonna follow your ordinance and we don't care what you do. And they were essentially challenging the police to write them a ticket, and there was no other option. They could not de-escalate it at that time. And so I'm gonna trust RCPD. I think we've got a great police department, and they've done a great job with judgment. We haven't had any of the disasters some cities have had with, these fights over masks. And I think in rare cases where people are just being blatant about it, that is rare and not that often. I've seen it on occasion, but generally it seems to work. And so, as I try to do problem solving, and I wish there was a perfect solution to this, but there's not in my mind. We're not gonna get universal, concurrence on it, and we're never gonna probably get Potawatomi County to agree to what Riley County's doing. That's like a bridge too far. And so the best course of action is to go with 16 May, and I feel good about that, because we've loosened up the vaccine requirements now. We're gonna go to 3 and 4. A lot of people are getting vaccines. The hospital today had 0 people in there being treated for COVID. And so the trend lines are looking pretty good, same in Topeka. And I think, with Health Order 20 having loosened up the restaurants and bars, we got full capacity. My take, talking to a lot of the owners, is they are happy with that, and they're not gonna get upset about the mask ordinance till 16 May, because the economic impact was the fact that they had restrictions on the number of people that were in there. And so I'm pretty much thinking that this is the way to go. So I want to go with option 1 and 16 May, and my assumption will be that we don't have to visit this again. That vaccines will come through, everything will be great, and we can just let it die on 16 May and go on about our business.
Mayor, I think for me, this has always been a well, not always, I guess, but definitely in the last 9 months, and as we adopted this ordinance, has been an issue of process and who should be, how that process works. And initially, we had tried to bring Fort Riley, K-State, USD 383, the EOC, Pot County, and the City of Manhattan all together to be unified and speaking the same message to many of the same overlapping population. Unfortunately, early on, it was clear that Pot County was not interested, and they left very quickly. And things evolved, so that really put Manhattan in a position where we were needing to adopt an ordinance to cover the city while the county, both counties really, were playing around and figuring out the language and the legal approaches as they got involved with the state legislature. So this has really been a super complex, convoluted process of government entities, and really the city has served as a backstop, and then saying, you know, it's not going to go beyond us, and we're going to have the mask order until you guys can figure it out. But we, as I've always known from the beginning, are not set up in a way to really do great enforcement on that, really not set up in a way to make medical decisions. We don't have a health officer. We don't have a health department. We don't have a lot of the things that all those other entities do, but we do have the ability to tell people to do something. And we did. And that is kind of where I have ended up talking about the process a lot, and I think people get lost in that, and they think that means I'm anti-mask, or I'm against, or I'm for us not being for the mask. I am for people that were tasked to do this and have the tools to do this from the beginning during a pandemic to use those tools. But given that, I'm glad to see the county commissions listening to health experts at the health department, and we all need to let the health department guide the community out of the crisis in the coming months. They're the best equipped to do so, and they've guided the community successfully, in my opinion, the past year. The vaccination process, as the mayor described, is going well, and people are excited to return to normal life. It will happen, but we must move forward slowly and carefully to get to that point. And based on those conversations with the health officer, with Julie Gibbs, with members of the EOC, and especially with USD 383, it makes the most sense for our city to align our ordinance, as they've requested, with the county's potential health order that could come as early as Thursday until the end of the school year. Going forward, I look to the health officer for their direction on extensions as needs arise, or if things change with vaccinations. And I think that hopefully the people in Riley County, including Pot County and the City of Manhattan, will also look to the health department for their health advice as those things happen between now and the summer. So bottom line is, we're all in this together, no matter what side of the county line we're on, and even what side of the country we're on. So I will definitely support the first May 16th, given the advice of the health officer.
Okay, you'll finally have some unity of command, I guess, between them. So is there any other discussion, or are we willing to make a motion?
Well, since I'm going to vote against it, Commissioner Hattusall here, I might as well explain why. Three things, and I think there's things we can all agree on, but that's not going to change anybody's vote. But A, everybody accepts the fact that a virus is so much smaller than any of the pores on anybody's mask, that the virus is not, the masks aren't stopping the virus. They're stopping people from spitting on each other, which is nice, and I think some people should continue to wear them forever. Secondly, the lethality of the COVID virus is not at a level that justifies continuing putting a lot of restrictions on people. It's been a year now, and we know that the people at risk are the elderly and the infirmed. People with fairly serious health problems to start with are the main people that are at risk, and we should continue to do everything we can to protect them. The rest of us, we know what works in mild cases of COVID to get better. If your doctor may just tell you to go home and tough it out, but you get on the internet as a layperson without any medical experience. I could go to the internet and look in there, type in there natural treatments for COVID, and you'll find take your zinc, take your vitamin D, take your vitamin C, and maybe magnesium. I've been doing that since last April, and I tested positive for antibodies, I told you that, and I may have had mild symptoms for a day and a half. I don't remember, it wasn't enough to get excited about. But the point being is there's no reason to run around like your hair's on fire when you see somebody without a mask on if you are just doing what you need to do to protect yourself. Take your zinc, take your vitamin D, take your vitamin C, maybe magnesium, and then even if you do get exposed to it, you'll have a super mild case because you've already got the treatment in your body that your doctor would give you if you had it. So why don't we just, for $20 a month, you can protect yourself and not worry about anybody giving you the COVID virus because your body will be healthy enough to resist it unless you're elderly and infirmed, at which time continue to live in a cave and be protected as best as you can. But the rest of us have the solution to COVID available to us at our local drugstore, pharmacy, grocery store. And instead of being worried about dying from COVID, which isn't going to happen, let's do what you can to make yourself a little bit healthier, boost your immune system, and then nobody has to worry if somebody around them is not wearing a mask anymore because you're safeguarded by your own immunity. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor, I would move that we exercise option 1, which is to extend the current mask ordinance to expire on May 16th. And the actual motion is to approve ordinance number 7533, amending section 22-73 of the city code, extending the term of the face mask ordinance requirements to 11:59 p.m. on May 16th, 2021.
Second.
Okay, City Clerk, we have a motion and a second, so Brenda, if you could please call the roll.
Commissioner Morse,
Yes.
Commissioner Hattasol,
No?
Commissioner Estabrook,
Yes.
Commissioner Reddy,
Yes, but I just want to say, I voted for the same option on July 9th, September 8th, December 2nd, March 2nd, and March 16th. It's consistent, it's about public health, and it's the right thing to do.
Mayor Butler.
Okay, I'm going to vote yes, but I'll make the comment that the reason is we finally got consistency between the county and the city.
Motion carries 4-1.
All right, we have one other item.
Microphone.
There we go, microphone's off here. We have one other item, which is a discussion item, so we will not be voting on it, and it has to do with providing some guidance to the city staff on the Housing Advisory Board and the workforce housing discussion and maybe the housing study. So 3 things, and Dennis, you get the stage.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Butler, Mayor Pro Tem Morris, and City Commissioners. For your last agenda item tonight, we want to have another conversation. We appreciate the guidance that you've given us back starting in December, then carrying through January, and into February. We had a discussion with you talking about the myriad of housing issues that we've been trying to address over the last couple of years. And there was a consensus by you as the governing body to establish a housing advisory board. And so you really gave us direction at that February meeting about let's go ahead and have a broad housing issue focus. We talked a little bit about some different definitions about housing, being suitable housing issues. We also talked about, is this a body that would address tenant landlord issues? And also, is this the right body to talk about the new workforce housing initiative that was included in the recent sales tax passage back in November? And so as we were talking then, I brought you some information about what a purpose could look like for this board. And we also talked about what a membership could look like with some different compositions of representation for this board. And we were really looking at about a 15-member board. During that conversation, you gave us some feedback. We heard from some community members in the Chamber of Commerce, and part of the conversation during that was, let's look at the membership a little bit more and think about, do we want some more finance representatives as we particularly look at the Workforce Housing Initiative, and then come back and think about what is the overall purpose and scope that this Housing Advisory Board would address. So knowing that we had these issues, and as we've been talking through, we've drafted some bylaws, we've gone back and looked at the membership composition, taking your comments, the chamber and some community groups' comments into play, and it really gave us pause to step back for a second and really think about what are the driving factors for the Housing Advisory Board. We heard early on, about a year and a half ago, from the K-State University Student Government Association. We've heard some community representatives about a request, let's have some type of Housing Advisory Board. The conversation is centered on the local housing mix, trying to understand what do we do as a community with a large number of rentals. There's also been a lot of conversation over time about the housing quality, and ahead of the conversation that many of you have addressed in the past related to safety and code compliance. What are the tenant landlord issues that were of particular interest to the Student Government Association? Clearly from our last housing study in 2000, the affordability and suitability of the housing issues in our community. And then with the new addition of the local sales tax initiative that has a funding component for the workforce housing, all those have kind of been the conversation that's still circulating out there. But then also, we were going forward last March with the housing study. Again, the first one, or the next one we would do since 2000, but we put that on hold because we saw there's going to be a large community input to that and did not want to advance that study during the COVID pandemic, and so we put that on hold. But as we were looking through this and trying to think about what is the composition and how do we want to charge a housing advisory board, we really see that there's three distinct efforts. And so we want to revisit this with you and make sure that you're in agreement or concurrence that these are the three areas that you want to see addressed. And then let's talk a little bit more about what is the best way to do these. And so really the housing study is a distinct effort. We said we wanted to do that last March. We haven't done one since 2000, which was called the Housing Manhattan, Planning for Our Future. We do want to do the housing study so we can generate some updated data, even use the consultant support to give us some solutions. If you have looked back at the 2000 study, there's a lot of detail in that housing study that went so far as to even highlight the number of housing units for apartments for income levels between 30 and 60% median income. There were some very detailed and specific recommendations from that report that have been left on the table, but having some of these solutions we think is important to have a refresh of where we are in 2021. Also, when you think about a housing study, thinking about what we got back in 2000 can be anywhere from 60 pages to other communities have 200-page documents for their housing study. Because one, it provides a lot of market information, it gives you a mix of what your housing stock is, but it also talks about what are some solutions based upon different demographics, based upon different housing needs in your community. So it really gives us a bunch of data. We did have the RFP ready to go last year. We have it out again that we want to review, see if we can get that on the street soon, and see if we can take the 12 to 15 month process that we see the housing study is anticipated to take to come back again with this 60 to 200 page document, whatever it may be that the consultant would come up with. So that's one distinct effort. We also view the Housing Advisory Board as a distinct effort where we need to come up with the purpose, the size, the composition, and then as we talked about at your last meeting, what is kind of the expertise we want on there? Some practitioners, those who work in housing issues every day, some who maybe have housing advocates, some who experience different types of housing. And so then what is the ultimate role of the Housing Advisory Board? Is it the information you want from them and recommendations on how to tackle some solutions to housing issues in our community once we better understand what those are from the housing study? And then again, our conversation, particularly from the Chamber of Commerce and others, was we now have a workforce housing initiative. The funding for this will not go into effect until 2023 when the sales tax component is begun. So really trying to get what is the definition as we all look at workforce housing initiative, and then what are the funded solutions that we can come up with to really tackle that specifically. And so as we were thinking about these three distinct efforts going forward, it made us rethink a little bit. Did we have our order right as we were going forward? Should you create the Housing Advisory Board first, not having the data and information to be informed from the housing study? Or should we go ahead and try to do everything kind of concurrently? And would you expect a Housing Advisory Board that you create to be able to tackle and have the expertise on these myriad of issues? And so actually going back through this, our thought is that let's rethink this and let's make sure we lead with the housing study. Like I said, we're about ready. We need to redo the RFP, RFQ to find the right consultant to understand that we do want some different information than what we wanted a year ago. We do want some information about workforce housing initiatives. We would actually like some more information if a consultant has some thoughts about what does a housing advisory board even look like. So we think that we can use some of the consultant expertise to inform how we do these other parts of the housing puzzle. We do see the housing study as really a great opportunity that we've not done since 2000 in terms of educating the community on housing issues specific to Manhattan. We know that a lot of people have a lot of ideas that they want to jump into solutions, but really does that paint the full picture for our community, and does it address all the issues that you want them to address? And then really, again, as we said, can this housing study inform the role and purpose of an advisory board? And then really, what is the ability to use the study to generate thoughts and ideas on the workforce housing funding component as well? And so one idea could be, we had planned with the RFQ for the housing study to have a steering committee with the housing study. We had done that back in 2000. We thought it worked out pretty well. It was about 18 members back in 2000. And so the thought is, as an interim step, to make sure that we do have some of the expertise and try to get people engaged, is let's do the housing study with a steering committee. And there could still be some other things going on and we've had some study circles and things in the past in the community that have been very helpful to inform on this conversation. But we could ultimately see, if we go forward with the steering committee with the housing study, that some of those members could ultimately be on a housing advisory board. So we don't want to necessarily miss a beat as we go forward. And then lastly, let's give the workforce housing initiative, since it does have a funding stream with it, a bit more attention and help us determine if the housing study can give us some information to help frame that workforce housing initiative. And then we might want to consider, to still keep this kind of a separate or standalone issue, that we could create a workforce housing task force within a year or so, and then launch that with the sales tax when it's generated in 2023. So again, let's kind of rethink this a little bit and make sure that we're giving all these different housing issues the right time and attention that we think they need, without lumping them all into one and expecting a group of 8 to 15 to be the ones who can solve and address all these issues for us. And I'll tell you what we're thinking about too, is when you look at approximately the 21 boards that have been created by the City Commission over time, we're trying to understand how would this board be in relation to those. And so of those boards, the average membership size is 8.1 members, anywhere from 4 members up to 15. We have 2 boards with 15 members. As we look at the composition, and then the last discussion was, well, maybe let's grow that even to 17 members or 18 members. Also trying to get a sense of what is the right balance to have a group that can work together, address these issues, and be their most effective. And so knowing from some of the past boards we've established, that 8 to 15 range seems to be, 15 seems to be the max. But again, I know there's interest from your conversation in the past about having representation and having expertise on this advisory board. So we want to give that a little bit more time. So we think a new approach tonight I want to bring to you for your conversation and discussion is really allow the housing study to guide and better inform our conversation around the housing goals and issues that you have. You may have different goals for workforce housing over the course of a 10-year span with the funded amount from the sales tax. You may have different goals from what the housing study presents that needs to be followed up in a different way about our housing quality and our housing stock. And so what we really want to do is utilize the facts, data, current information, and of course the consultant expertise from across the country. And then really want to also address the concern about having that more finance focus on the workforce housing initiative, and so that way we can deliver on that initiative. And then lastly, what we're doing in the manager's office is we've been thinking about what are the staffing resources needed to support the housing study, creation of the housing board, how often do we want them to meet, At the very beginning, you see it being a monthly meeting, and then it's a workforce housing initiative, a separate component, because you got to work on maybe some of the funding pieces that go with that. So we really see some significant staff time that we need to give to this based upon the multiple issues that are associated with housing in the community. And so tonight we wanted to throw some of that concept out to you, is really lead with the housing study, let that go on, have a steering committee, that can be the interim step to a housing advisory board, and then let you have some more time to do some community engagement. And then we can see about doing the full establishment or creation of a housing advisory board, roughly in conjunction with the housing studies completion. And then again, begin that second, what I call the second part of the work on the workforce of housing initiative. Again, think about it. Could it be a separate task force? And are you comfortable with that taking flight maybe here in a year? And so we want to show progress. We know everyone's interested in moving forward, but we think the housing study and the steering committee gets it in the right order, in the right way, with the right deliberation to best engage our community as we move forward on this. And so tonight, I just ask for some of your discussion and thoughts, and help us give a little bit more guidance as we go forward with this. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, good. That was an excellent summation of the issues, I think. So commissioner comments.
I wanted to ask Dennis, the last slide there, the middle point was address concern to have more of a finance focus on work. Talk about what that means to you or to city administration.
We had figured out when the sales tax initiative was passed through the voter referendum, I believe roughly on an annual basis, that percentage of the sales tax dedicated for local initiatives could be about $600,000 a year. Knowing that you have a pot of money to do something with to help support your housing goals, do you want to have some people with a finance background to help think about how you can leverage that money through different financing options, working with nonprofit groups, private sector groups, individuals, just someone who has more of experience working in financial transactions around housing. You see a lot of the nonprofits who do senior housing and other folks who do tax credit around housing issues. It's a bit more complicated when you try to put a partnership or deal together with private dollars and public dollars. And so having some folks who have some of that background or experience was what I kind of heard from the last discussion about, let's see if we can bring a finance to leverage that money from the sales tax to its maximum to achieve the goals that you want with that initiative.
I'm just getting impatient is all, and I view all of the, I mean, when I saw the word rethink, I thought the word overthink applied, because it's just the absence of any kind of housing focus for a long period of time, I mean, is why we're at this point, I think. I was anxious to have the housing study done initially in order to give us some sense of direction. And we kind of got the cart before the horse, because now we have the money coming and but we have 2 years until it's a reality also. So we have time, but I don't want to, I want us to be ready to go and do something. And that doesn't mean I want to just give money away, I don't. But I would really like for some consideration of some new kinds of initiatives. We have, I mean, we haven't tried so many things that other communities have tried. And I don't know what's right for Manhattan any more than anybody else does. But I'd like for us to try something that is that we can feel really good about. I'm not interested in more tax credits, which is more public housing, and with that in keeping with the Section 8 and the public housing that we already have. But I think we get to that affordable housing piece, and that's the one that I'm after. And I don't know, that's what, I don't know all the possibilities. I always thought that a tiny house village would be a good pilot, but that was when I first got elected 4 years ago, and nothing has happened, so I'm not gonna hold out for that anymore. And, but there are some initiatives, and there are great minds that can help with that advice, and so I don't wanna go it alone. And I want the advice of some professionals. I want the advice of some of the community members. But I don't want to drag it out to the point that we don't get anywhere and we don't stall and end up with nothing for our effort.
Had us all here. I just think that's why, the housing study, getting that thing going, and it doesn't have to necessarily be done before, I would hope that they could give us some data 2/3 of the way through by the end of the year that gives us some idea of what kind of things are out there that a committee could then start thinking about and still have 14 months before any money actually shows up that we could spend on anything. But no, it just seems like we gotta figure out what, besides just the big picture of affordable housing and workforce housing stuff, okay, what does that mean, and how do we, what are our assets, and the whole picture of, so I think that the housing study part makes a lot of sense. It doesn't mean we don't do anything over the next year until we get the results of that, but we could start bringing some of the great minds together, and they could start sifting through other bright ideas that communities have had, things that we've tried before and was helpful, things we tried before and didn't work, and start having at least some discussions, and toward the end of the year, maybe get them up and rolling would be an idea.
I'm curious if there's public comment. I think I do share Commissioner Moore's, well, probably all of our concern, that it's kind of kicking it down the road farther. But there's some really important stakeholders that have come very close to being at the table with each other that we need to respect, and they are waiting to be at that table and flesh out those ideas. So I don't know if that incorporates the steering committee of a housing plan, if that what that looks like, and so I don't know. Is there public comment?
Just let me comment first. I just think, I'm okay with having a housing study. I think we've been talking about housing at least 8 years I've been here, and probably 10 years since Mayor Butler's been on the city commission, but so many variations of it. It was with rentals, it was with tiny houses, it was with developers, it was with the housing authority, it was with so many housing problems or issues and situations, and the chamber was also looking at it. What I would like is a timeline. So you said we won't collect the money till 2023. So we're in March right now, and I think it would be good to have a steering committee first, put out your RFQ, whatever it is we are looking for. And part of that RFQ needs to be people that know something about zones, how they're going to collect the data in our community. I never really got a good comprehensive picture of rentals and Airbnbs and short-term rentals and long-term rentals and all of these words that we use, but I don't know what we have in our community. So to gather that information, see where the gaps are, and then, and that's what, I want that part to be the RFQ process, to figure out a consultant that can analyze it a little bit deeper. I don't want anecdotes. I don't want to know what makes us feel good. I want to know what we need in the community, and define suitable housing, affordable housing, workforce housing, and all of these other types of verbiage that we need to consider. And after that recommendation or the RFQ or the consultants are done, I'm hoping 6 to 8 months from whenever they start, then plan the advisory board to look at some goals and benchmarks. By 2023, we should have all of this in place so we have knowledge of what to do once the tax money starts coming in. And the finance part that you addressed earlier, I think it's good to have some finance people there to see how we can, it could be 600,000, but what do you do with that? Is it 100,000 now, 200,000? How do you use that money? Is it private partnerships? How does all of that utilized? And I know we have some experts in the community, but a consultant, if they're dedicated to that as their job, it's different than volunteers. So I think we need something specific and goal-oriented. So that's, hopefully that'll give us into the transition phase by 2023.
Okay, this says a few people still in the audience. Do we have anyone that wishes to make public comment on this particular thing? If so, just come forward and state your name and your address, and we'll be happy to hear what you would like to let us know.
Pick one.
This is fine. Donna Shankamlin, 1922 Leavenworth. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioners, and thank you. Very good presentation. I've been considering the issue that was put as an anxiety that we define housing alone with no qualifiers as a very big domain of inquiry, covering already we know different priority issues for different demographics, different aspects of the housing system that people are saying are problematic. And I'm getting the sense that we're not ready to define the scope of work and hand it to a group of 8 to 15 people yet. At the same time, we've been hearing over the last 5 years people coming to these meetings and saying, here's a really critical issue now. And in the year of the pandemic, we all know that in our community and in the wider communities, emergencies in housing, whether it's those people whose owned property has been vacant for too long, or people who are facing evictions, or people who are anxious that they won't be able to pay their mortgage. Emergency has been what we've been living with for the last year, and we're seeing that unwind. So we know that there is a need, even as we try to address gaps since 2000, that of knowledge, of self-knowledge in our housing system that need to be filled. There is also going to be, while that housing study takes place, urgent needs that the citizens are going to bring to you, saying, what are we doing for our residency and our citizenry? So I've been noting a few things that perhaps a staging, and we don't have to be completely linear. There is such a thing as parallel processing. I don't know that we can't have two bodies working in a complementary fashion. One, a steering committee to help solicit the kind of questions from the public that should drive the information gathering of a new updated study. And another that, because my background is really on dialogue and facilitating public inquiry and public learning, I think this town really needs to know itself. And we need to know ourselves in relationship to what other towns are doing or not doing, and that's all very good. It's wonderful to have experts in research and research methods go out and compare innovations that are happening elsewhere with the conditions here on the ground. But I would like to say that if you took a steering committee as a foundation for a future board, I would like to point out a few things that might be able to accomplish. And the first thing is probably to take a good hard look at the way that a couple of years ago that study was formulated. I think that this steering committee probably needs to identify and solicit the kind of knowledge that would fill the gaps that we, of our system, where it's not working, where it's not meeting needs. But in addition, I think that such a steering committee needs to solicit community testimony and discussion regarding the critical short-term housing needs that are hurting our economy from several different directions. And categorize those in terms of not simply rental versus home ownership, but in terms of categories such as the needs of emergency housing and the needs of, yes, workforce, but also senior or wraparound services housing. So that really requires a lot of solicitation of community. And I don't think that it would be unuseful to have a coordinated effort by hired consultants as well as citizens soliciting more citizens. Looks like I ran out of time. I can write my 2 remaining points that I think the steering committee would need to accomplish in order to create the foundation for a later board. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make a public comment on this topic? Okay, seeing none. Go back to the commission. I wanted to just comment, I think that the staff has really honed in on, that this is 3 distinct efforts. And one of the things is, as I was struggling through looking at trying to create the boards, if we have a housing advisory board that tries to take on workforce, it's 2 different missions. And it gets very confusing, and then the board is too big. So as I look at this, my analysis would be, yes, we need to go forward with a housing study. We've already funded it, so that's really not an issue. Let's get that thing launched. We should have a housing advisory board which doesn't have the mission of workforce housing. Just take that out of there. And they won't have access to that money that comes from the sales tax initiative. And I would keep that board no greater than 9 people, just because a large board just has trouble getting from point A to point B. And that board could, pretty much they got a wide open charter to look at whatever they wish to look at. I would actually do those 2 concurrently. I think we could start the housing study and we could put together the housing advisory board. And I say that because we had the meeting at KSU over a year ago on that. And so we need to speed that one up. I agree with Commissioner Morris on that. I mean, how long are we gonna kick this one down? Let's do the workforce, let's do the housing advisory board and the housing study. I would say, start the housing study now, get that advisory board in place within 3 months. And then wait on the workforce housing initiative, because they're not gonna have funds till 2023. And try to get them in place by about this time next year. And that'll be when the housing study ends. And that's close to what the staff recommends. It just sort of, takes 2 of them and makes them a little bit more parallel. If you drew a Gantt chart, I'd kick off the housing study and then within 6 months have the advisory board in place, and then within 12 to 15 months have the workforce housing initiative group in place. And then understand that the housing advisory board, the requirements to be on that would be different than workforce housing, because clearly you've got to make absolutely certain, and the chamber would support this based on my conversations with them today, that that money is spent according to how the taxpayers voted on it. And so it can't go off into different rabbit holes. It's got to directly impact economic development and workforce housing. And that's going to be distinctly different than some of the things the Housing Advisory Board will be wanting to address. So that's my thoughts on that.
I think there's probably some concern that has festered amongst minds in the community of how those dollars in the sales tax will be used, and and that's probably fair for people to be wondering as we discuss the Housing Advisory Board. and what that looks like into workforce housing. And so I think the chamber has tried to get in front of that and say, look, this is how, remember, this is what this is for. And we all go back to that language that we talked about when we put it on the ballot of what workforce housing, how it's tied to the workforce and close to your work base, all of those things. So that it's going to be a continuous thing. It's not necessarily going to go away, but it's not driving my decision making at this point. And though it's really important that it exists and that the housing study and the housing advisory board is what I'm hearing are potentially parallel things. And on here, you're talking about an RFP within a month. And if we're having input from the stakeholders that we identified, potentially already as types of entities that we'd like to eventually be on an advisory board, or that would be ideal to get their feedback of what they would like in that RFP, including the chamber, including the workforce housing. We wouldn't want to see another RFP in 2 years to tell us what workforce housing is for Manhattan. It needs to be pretty inclusive, a one-shot deal to inform that. But you have a month to repurpose the last one and include things that the advisory board, which may be initially a steering committee. I'm open to that. But I think Commissioner Hattisall said by the end of this year there's an advisory board. If the steering committee informs the RFP and then begins to consolidate around an advisory board this summer, and we get the study back and they're doing things by the end of the year, I think we've accomplished some things leading into next year where workforce housing, again, we'll have this debate. I don't think that's going to go away for a decade. Just like what is economic development, right? It's going to be defined for a while in various ways, but that's not what this argument is necessarily about, or the direction. I think we need to get those two entities, and the way Donna had described parallel processes makes sense to me, that you can get the Housing Advisory Board going as that RFP is out there, and as the consultants bringing in information to inform that housing. And so summer to winter of this year seems reasonable.
Dennis, this is Commissioner Reddy. I think if you can send us some kind of a timeline would be good, because I don't know how long it takes once you push something like an RFQ out to get responses. And then since we have a strategic planning committee going on right now with Planning Next, and we gave them 6 to 8 months, and that's a 25 board member steering committee, kind of what Donna was saying. So they're kind of leading this throughout the community, and then you have this consultancy firm, and they're using that as their model for feedback information, and also kind of what we're doing with the diversity task force. So, but I know we're thinking about a smaller group to help with the consultants, but that's going to depend on, I don't know what type of consultants there are, if they work with the steering committee like this, and I think that would come with more conversations and research that you do. I do want to see some kind of a timeline. I just don't know how long it takes to collect data, talk to people, and hopefully this is March, maybe by May or June, there might be some more in-person things where they can have more conversations and travel here, because if you're going to do this, I would like somebody that's here. You can't just do this with the internet. You need to go out and check out some zoning areas, some areas that are developed, some properties and what it looks like and what we need to do better, and where we can expand and where there's room for growth, because like we said earlier, there isn't much land that we can just go outward in. So I think I would really like to see a timeline. I think you've heard ideas about where we want to see that by the end of 2023. By 2023, I don't even know which one of us is going to be here. So everybody's going to define their own way, like they do every city commission for every pot of money that we have. And we kind of left it vague like that, sometimes on purpose, because the city commissioners at that time, depending on how things are, that's why it is set up that way. We are not going to be the 5 that decide some of those things. So I just want to see, like I said, a timeline of some kind. to the end goal of having an advisory board.
Can I add one thing? I think the community is certainly going to mesh these ideas of workforce housing and the Housing Advisory Board together. But just for reference, this board, or this commission, as a goal, at our first retreat, as this commission, we had indicated that we were looking towards a Housing Advisory Board. And prior to that, there had been a work done to make that happen. So the effort to get that done has been in existence long before there was a workforce housing fund, and before I know there's an interest in defining what that is and creating what that dedicated fund does, but we've been working towards the Workforce Housing Advisory Board at least a year before that. So it's it makes sense to do both, and they complement each other, but it's also important to recognize that one should also be done. We've been waiting on it to get done.
Dennis, let me ask about the study that you have ready to go. I know that there was the study a year ago that was canceled. You got it all ready, and then have we seen the RFP or the scope of what's expected for the new housing study? Did we do that?
Yeah, I have right here. So this is what we had last year.
Have we seen it?
Yeah, last year, a year ago.
Okay.
So we'll send it out to you
Yeah.
because what we have in here.
Because I think things have changed.
Yeah, and, well, certainly. But
Yeah.
also what you've told me tonight, we need to update this to make sure that we have the full scope for the consultants' work and their capabilities to provide some of the product that we want to help guide us. But last year, when we had this out in front of you all and we were ready to go forward, we did have a time frame in here talking about the 12 to 14 months. And so, yeah, that definitely needs to be updated. So we will get to your timeline because we need to include that with the consultant expectations as well when we do the RFQ.
And I would say that's not just a year old, that's at least 18 months old.
Yeah, because we were ready to go in
Yeah,
March, so
because I think the housing situation, the population, I mean, there are and have been changes over the course of this last 18 months.
right. So yeah, we'll be happy to share this. We need to update it and
That'd be
then
great.
incorporate your comments.
Because I
as
was
we go.
thinking, oh my gosh, we don't want to go out, if we're considering changing any kind of, that was focused on marketing. And I'm not sure marketing is what we want to focus on now. So maybe we need to, and yeah, I don't want to delay things either, but I think the study has to be, what's going to be useful to the community as a whole.
So one of the things, and like I said, we'll update this based upon your comments tonight, but some of the goals we were looking for last year that I imagine will stay in here is about, we wanted the consultant to help produce some suitable housing policies and strategy recommendations. We wanted this housing study to help us outline some policies and strategy evaluation, barrier analysis, suitable housing, even vision and goals. That gets back to what we want the advisory board to focus on. So I think there are the fundamental components in here, but we need to revisit that, get some more community input on this, and then incorporate your thoughts from tonight, which have been very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so to sum up, if what I'm hearing is right, and if you've got enough information, it sounds to me like the commission pretty much would like to see the housing study launched as quickly as possible, that we want a housing advisory board, we want a workforce housing task force to separate the mission to make that easier, and then more important, as Commissioner Reddy has said, we would like a Gantt chart, which is a timeline, that would basically start with a housing study but clearly overlap with establishment of the Housing Advisory Board and conclude with the Workforce Housing Initiative task force. And if you could sort of craft that so that it works, I think that will pretty much do what we desired.
Yeah, by then you should have 50 people from the 2 task force available for something else to do.
The Strategic Planning Committee.
I guess, Mayor, I agree with that summary on the caveat that the creation of that task force or any kind of efforts that take city staff time to design and massage with the chamber and all that, do not delay those other first parts of it, because that might take some time. And
Yeah,
we
yeah,
have
correct.
time. The only thing we do have with that is time. We have to wait till the funds come in, so.
Yeah, and the workforce thing would be at the end of that Gantt chart, so that gives you plenty of things to work on. Appreciate the time, and thank you everyone out there for tuning in, listening to us tonight, and on that note, the meeting is adjourned.